IT Pro TV, an easy, entertaining approach to online IT training. Stream over 2,000 hours of up-to-date, high-quality video content live and on demand. For a free 7-day trial and for a limited time, get 50% off a monthly membership for the lifetime of your active subscription. Visit itpro.tv/startup security and use the code SS50. Do you have a website, an external presence, employees, an office? Any of these things can be compromised and attacked. How are you defending these assets? Have you penetration tested these public assets? Start 2017 by taking a proactive approach to securing your vulnerable areas. Black Hills Information Security has been helping companies find their weaknesses since 2008. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com and see how they can help you sleep better at night. Welcome back, everyone, to Startup Security Weekly. Speaking of Black Hills Information Security, they're putting on a conference called Wild West Hackin' Fest, and it's being put on by the Red Team specialists for anybody and everybody interested in information security, Michael. That's anybody and everybody. How about that?
And it's going to have the world-famous hacker John Strand at it, right?
Yes, and lots of other people on October 27th and 28th for hands-on hacking talks by famous infosecers like Dave Kennedy, Deviant Egypt, Chris Nickerson, Chris Gates, Mike Poore, and Sub T. Check it out at wildwesthackinfest.com. That's HACKIN fest.com.
I like it. Hey, how was your conference experience this week? How'd the booth work out? New swag, hacker trivia? How did it all go?
It went really well. Thank you for asking. I didn't get a chance to really talk with too many vendors to give out any awards for A for the Day, which I was thinking about. There just wasn't enough vendors there, to be fair. It was more actually of a community event where I got to talk with people in depth about a lot of subjects, which often doesn't happen at some of the larger conferences that we attended. So this was the fourth one. I liked Source for that reason where, like, dude, I got to sit down with old friends, new friends, and talk for like a half an hour about topics. Nice. And that was the number one value that I got out of this particular conference. Now, I do want to do something with our A for the Days, Michael, because there have been 3 A for the Days.
You've got my brain turning.
They're all female, and I don't know if I want to bring them on all at once because I want to give them all kind of a fair shot to showcase their awesome communication skills and insights into the industry. But I definitely want to bring them on a show, maybe this show. I don't know. We'll talk offline.
Well, I'll tell you what. I mean, what I'll offer online is that now that I've worked on the value prop audit, and it's expanded a bit since you and I last talked, but the rubric for it is actually really well defined. I'm going to be at an event in about less than a month, and they're going to have 40 or 45 partners / sponsors there. I'm going to figure out how quickly I can use it. So now you've put in my head, I will come back with at least an A for the day, maybe 2. Because I'll be there for 2 days. Yep. And let me see what I can come up with, because that might give us then a metric where we can use it and we can actually be fairly consistent. We can explain why they're an A for a day, not just that we liked them, but we give some real pointed feedback on it.
Yep.
I like it. I like it a lot.
All right. I don't think I had anything else on Source that was relevant to this show. I think that was it.
Always relevant.
I had a couple stories in here, Michael, that I thought were really thought-provoking from your articles and discussions that you posted. So I want to
go where you want, man.
I'm really excited.
I did extra prep this week.
I'm really excited to talk about the 4 social marketing strategies with the highest ROI for startups. And there's a couple of reasons why. One, I have been looking at at Security Weekly, our social media statistics, and I think we've plateaued in a few different areas, and we're going to get some help to kind of raise the bar and get off of that plateau.
Awesome.
I thought that the advice they had in this article was good with one exception. And number one is take advantage of Facebook's ability to target advertising. And this was actually advice I just gave a few hours ago to a conference being held in Connecticut, besides Connecticut. And I told them, hey, if you want more people to come to your conference, go look at Facebook ads because you can target them to information security professionals in Connecticut. So I think that advice is sound. It's one that I've gotten over the years as well. Now, I don't. They said some other things about in case you don't have to blah blah blah. There's a lot of things that go into Facebook advertising, right? Like you can say that, like target it, right? But there's a lot more that goes into it. You may want to consider getting a specialist. Like I tend to think I like to research things and try and understand things. When it comes to social media and SEO, I like to have an expert. Like I like to think that I'm okay with security stuff. But there are people that are really good with the SEO and social media and definitely get their help and advice, even if you spend some money. So while a Facebook ad may seem kind of cheap, if you do it wrong, you might as well just like set that money on fire. So be careful with that.
No, I'm really glad you said that because I had notes in my prep. I was like, ask Paul, because I dabbled in it enough. Like $5, $10 spends, $30 max. Like, let me just play. And it was interesting. And my takeaway from it was, I don't know what I'm doing. There's
so
too
you
much
can
here.
Set money on fire like really fast.
Yeah. But I also saw the power of it.
Yeah. And so you can get some wins in there too. And I think if you're starting at a lower threshold in some of the social network, you can see some growth. And what happened with me, and maybe it's just me, but it depends on the scale of it all. Like you hit a plateau that if you're going to put budget into it, it's tough to grow it from that point. So,
well, the other thing I figured out too, and I guess it depends on what your outcome is, but where I've noticed people successful with it, and this is going to appeal to startups, is what action do you want somebody to take? Just come like your page? Wow. I mean, you're paying a lot for that. By the way, there's a way to do that. That's fine. But if you had an action to take that led to revenue, it made it a lot easier, because then you could say, hey, whether they call them tripwires, I've got the $7 product, cool. Or I've got a $99 or $1,000 or whatever. But if you could start understanding what your funnel is and what your lead is and the role that the Facebook marketing is paying in it, then I can say, well, it's $6 per, actual acquisition, but that was a $100 sale. Oh, that's good. Is it good? I don't know. But at least you have something to compare it against. And that's actually part of the reason I was like, okay, so I have some things that I should figure out. And actually, now that I'm getting closer to the value prop audit, this has popped back in my screen as this might be something to start playing with again over the summer. Right. So we'll see.
Now, number 2 on their list is really hard. I'm just throwing that out there. That's respond quickly to direct messages and PMs. It's something that we've talked about on the show. It's something that I really want a software technology company to help with.
Need a chatbot. Yeah.
I don't want a chatbot.
I did that just to piss you off.
What I want is something to help me streamline answering messages on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, which are our 3 primary social media outlets. And right now, like we're just talking
LinkedIn's locked itself down, right?
In what respect?
Every round with LinkedIn, it used to be you could pull profile data, used to be able to, because there were solutions that could pull on all of them. And instead of becoming more interoperable, everybody's like, oh, well, what I need to do is keep everybody on my site. And so it's getting tougher and tougher to have a solution that allows us to do that multiple places and with a team. Right. Does Hootsuite do it still? Or are they also limited?
I need to go back and look at Hootsuite for this purpose. Hootsuite was kind of clunky in terms of responding to messages. Like sometimes it'd let you respond, sometimes it wouldn't. It was weird. Like sometimes you wouldn't see the message, is my experience. Maybe they cleaned it up. And then it gets into like all the devices that you have. Like, okay, so I'm holding my phone, but now I've got my Chromebook and then I'm on my desktop. And anyway, it's hard to do that. So I hope for help automating that process. So not so much in a chatbot, but making it easier for someone like myself to try and respond to as much as possible and helping with that process. So,
yeah, I like it.
Now, this one I disagree with. It says Twitter has become the most popular social platform for business. I think that's a somewhat incorrect statement. It might be correct for a particular business or vertical. It might be correct for you, but it might be completely wrong for someone else.
I completely agree with you.
And I've had this conversation with Jason Blanchard from Sands, who coached me on a lot of social media things. And he's like, dude, you just got to figure out like where your audience is responding the best and what they're responding to. And those are 2 different things. So you may say, well, security people aren't really into Facebook, but if you hit them with the right stuff on Facebook, in the right amount, in the right quantity, it can work for you. So like I haven't gone to Instagram. However, in cigars, Instagram is pretty popular, so that's something we got to get better at on the cigar side. But in the security side, like I settled on those three, and all of these have analytics to tell you how well you're doing or not. And YouTube is another one that I would throw in there as well as a social network.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. And I was going to say I had kind of the same conclusion. What I'm also finding, and I will do better in analytics over the next year, but that each of the social networks almost has a different flavor to it. Like, sure, I'm attracting security people, but they interact with each of the networks differently, and that kind of creates a different feel. And it's not good or bad. It's just more of like a know your audience, know who you're playing to in each of those, and that kind of makes sense. Let me push on the fourth one, though, because this is actually my favorite part. Yeah. Create an engaging ad that asks a question. Here's why. We know that my favorite question is, what problem are you trying to solve? Don't ask that question. No. Well, actually, I might ask that question. Right. But here's the thing. When you capture, when you isolate the problem down properly and you ask it as a question, you automatically elevate it in our brain. We used to say the most powerful word is why. Make a statement, but like if I would say like, your password sucks, people will be like, whatever, screw you. As soon as you say why your password sucks, what you do is you trigger this response where, well, wait a minute. I agree, but I want to see if they got it right. Or you legitimately go, I never thought of it. Let me go check why. Now, that's not as true. We're a little bit more savvy, but the thing is, when you ask the question, it has this fantastic ability to just hook the brain. And if somebody has that problem, if you've isolated the problem properly and you've elevated it, then their brain locks onto it and you've got their attention. What you do with it next is up to how well you did your ad. But I think this is great advice. That said, it's not easy. No. And so test. You got to test, right? See, like this is where what I'm coming down to with the people I trust to do stuff like this. Like I'll say, well, you like this one or this one? And they always say A/B test it. Test them both. And then you can figure out which one pulls better. Go with that one. Mm-hmm. So that's the other thing too, like predicting it. I don't know. Try it. See what comes out of it.
Right. And trying it may increase the spend in a particular area. But I think in the long run, if you do that, Michael, you're going to come out ahead. Right.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's back to, even just think about our guest, right? You need evidence and you need some sort of evidence and you've got to drive it. So yeah, it will increase your short run spend, or in my world, in fact, I've listened to other people. So I've tried to get my head wrapped around this. What it probably means is that you have a test budget and okay, I'm going to test this for, 10 days in this particular setting. And I'm going to compare these three things off against each other. And at the end of that 10 days, my test is going to conclude. And then whichever one works best, we're going to then either iterate on that or just run with it. But eventually their point is you should be able to get to a campaign that works pretty well. And as you pointed out, until it plateaus, and then you shift it up or do something else. Right. If you're measuring these things, though, and that's where we agree, if you're measuring them, you'll figure out the ones that work, that don't work, and you'll get better at it. And that's where your spend gets better.
I'm glad you said that because, and I think this is something you've talked about in a lot of different ways, Michael. It's like, what are you measuring and why, and how are you measuring it? So it's not just about like you go and you look at the stats for this kind of thing, and you're like, what is a good, like, first, what are my goals, and then like, what is a really good measurement for that? And I was actually, it's funny you put this article in here because yesterday I spent, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes or so just popping through all our social networks and looking at some of the analytics. And I was like, I'm glad we're bringing in someone to help us with this because I don't know how to measure it, what's an effective measurement, and what is a good growth, what is not, what my goals should be. I don't know those things. I need help with those things. So
let me offer a dimension too. I'm always still going to look at measurement in terms of trends. I was telling you offline, I was at a board meeting last night. I was asking a lot of questions about like 3-year trends because it's budget season for us. That's always going to work. But I've started to come up with a different way to think about measurement too. Think about what you need to measure in order to protect the value that you've projected. So if you go back to it for a second, right? If we look at value prop, what problem are you solving? What value do you create solving that problem? And then we look at a third component, and we'll talk about that later, but we look at impact. But when we expand out to like straight talk and we ask about measurement, what I tell people now is, what do you need to measure to protect that value? So as you said, when you go look at the analytics, can you tell me that one campaign is doing better than the other? Can you signal that one campaign is no longer as useful as it used to be and needs to be retired? And can you give me enough detail that I can figure out if I just tweak this, whether it's placement, it's timing, it's amount to spend, or whatever else, I'm going to get the value I want. Now, is that easy? Well, no, I don't ask easy questions. But it's an important question. And so instead of thinking about it as measuring as pat yourself on the back, look me, I did good, it's much more of a, what do I need to measure to protect the value I'm expecting to get?
Yes.
Which could be stuff that guides you.
Well, and I think you need to ask why, and I think you need
Always.
to look at metrics that matter. It's almost like very similar to security metrics, right? And here's a very basic YouTube example, because I think this is important for startups, because when you start doing marketing at a certain level, like in your seed round, for example, which is where I recommend you start doing some marketing and putting some real effort into it, right? You're going to have to measure things. And so here's a really simple example. I look at the YouTube channel and I look at the total number of views. And if that's got a good curve to it, like an upward trend, I'm like, but ask why. And the reason why is, well, we're putting out more videos in our channel. So that's not a really compelling metric. However, a better metric is to look at the engagement of all of your videos, because then it doesn't really matter how many videos you put in. Are you increasing your engagement with your audience through your videos is a much better question to ask and a much better measurement. So that's my recommendation, especially for startups if you haven't, because startups are just starting their marketing programs, and it's about how you ask some of these questions and what questions to ask.
Yeah, you know what? Let me bring up this other article then, the 10x rule. I've talked about it before. Grant Cardone. I've enjoyed his style. I've enjoyed his stuff. He's fun to watch. He does good things. So if you want to look at somebody doing stuff on Facebook and just kind of define the odds, that's Grant Cardone. And he has a number of books. I think I grabbed Be Obsessed or Be Average. It's on my reading list. It is in the top 5 that I'll get to in the next month or two. But so this is a short article on him. And what it said is that 10x is a mindset. And I think Grant would completely agree with that and would espouse that. But what I like about this is, because we've talked about this before. So this is great as an article, whether you're in startup or you're interacting with startups in some way. One of the things that you hear a lot of people tell you is that if they're going to invest in a startup, they're looking for a 10x return in a 5-year period. So what that means is if I put $100,000 into your startup, what I need is some level of confidence that in 5 years, you're going to return to me 10x that. You're going to give me $1 million back. Now, when you then go deeper into it, and we've talked about the economics of it, they don't think you have to make the investment with some confidence that, hey, you're going to work out. But when you look at the law of averages, one is going to be that proverbial unicorn or runaway hit. Most are going to return you 2 to 3x, and half are going to fail, or something in that range. Different people have different thresholds and different ways of doing it. What this does is it twists a little bit and it says, okay, cool. So you've got an investor, they've invested in you. Now you can take this and say, I've got a board of directors that gave me a thumbs up. I just got approval to put this new solution in place. I've got whatever. So this works a number of ways. The question is always, how do I get to 10x value? And what Grant will say is, what's the worst that happens if you shoot for 10x, but you only get 6?
Yeah.
Or 3 or 2. And in fact, I've talked to a couple of CFOs recently, and I've said, listen, if somebody can offer me 2x value, 3x value, and they look at me deadpan and they go, Michael, 1x, 1.5x, I'd be ecstatic. Oh, okay, cool. I still think, and the point is, right, shoot for 10x. There's another guy that I like a lot, Commander Mark Devine, and he wrote Unbeatable Mind, great book on mindset. He's all about 20x. And about how we restrain ourselves and we don't reach our full potential, and it's a tragedy. I bought in on that. And so the reason I put this in, though, is that don't always look at it in terms of revenue or dollars. Somebody's watching our show. When I prep, I'm thinking, will they get value from this? Will they be 10 times better having heard that, having listened to that, having been part of that, than if they weren't? Now, again, right, I know on the law of averages, every single thing we do isn't going to work for everybody, but it's a mindset that basically says somebody's investing time in you. They're investing attention into you. They're going to listen to your show. They're going to listen to your talk. They're going to come visit your booth. They're going to come tell you whatever their security challenge is. Will they be better as a result of their interaction with you? Yeah, good, right mindset. If not, well, you got an opportunity. Get a better mindset.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's it. That was actually longer than I expected it to be.
Sorry, where else do you want to go?
To just finish it, Bradfeld's been writing about this stuff for years. Feld Thoughts is a great blog. And this one is probably hitting home for me because it's easy to get distracted with ideas. And the more I look at focus and the more I look at deep work and the more I look at all those things, we are really good at starting. And we are not really good at finishing. We got a lot of half-open projects and stuff here and here and here. And over the last year or so, I've been really kind of focusing myself on just getting it done, just moving a little quicker, just shipping it. But what I liked about this wasn't just the, hey, ship it. But what he basically said here was, and this is his end. I'm going to quote it because I really liked it. This may sound simple and trite, but think about it for a second. If you are a CEO or a founder, are you creating an illusion of shipping, but creating a cycle of bright, shiny object syndrome? Love that question.
Yep.
And what I can tell you actually is I cleared most of my calendar yesterday. I had to clear what I called my monkey mind. Well, I didn't call it my monkey mind. It's a concept. But I needed some clarity. And I actually spent like 6 or 7 hours yesterday just digging into an issue to realize, if I just finish this and then finish this and then finish this, look what I've done. And it cleaned up a lot for me. So the advice is any projects you're on, like anytime somebody says to me, I've got 20 priorities. Cool. So you have none. That's what you're saying.
Yes.
Go find 1 or 2 things, do them till they're done, move on to the next one.
Agreed.
The article on pivots, it's interesting to read. I put it in there for 2 reasons. I'm going to put it this way. This quote really stuck out to me, and it's about maybe halfway down. Pivots begin with the growing misalignment of KPIs around product, market, growth, and revenue, and they end when you see those figures coming back into alignment. So the point is, if we understand what we're measuring, was what you and I were just talking about, you'll start to realize, this isn't working right, and you'll start that pivot. But when you then start to realize, okay, I'm measuring the right stuff, I'm protecting that value, I'm making the right decisions, your pivot's over. I liked that because we say this word pivot a lot, and I've talked to a lot of startups, and I'm working with some where we use that word. This gave me some insights on it. But what I loved also was back at the top. And there's a lot of interest. This is a long story. But here's the 4 pillars of looking at it in terms of a framework. Your product, your market of target customers or users, right? So we call it your addressable market. Your go-to-market strategy, how they're going to know about you, and your business model, how you make money. It's a true pivot when you have to completely change one of these 4 things, and your decision to pivot should only be triggered when you see one of these columns crumbling. I think that, just thinking about those 4 pillars, now go back to the measurement conversation. How are you measuring in terms of protecting value and guiding actions, your product, your target market, your go-to-market strategy, and your business model? Are you making money? Just do that. I think it's solid. And then maybe we don't need to pivot as much. Like maybe sometimes what we're calling pivots is just a lack of clarity. If you can define these 4 things, I think you're in really good shape. So that's what I liked about this particular
article. I liked the article, not your article, but the article on 6 reasons your small business will fail. And this is 6 reasons that your company will fail, that your startup will fail, that your consulting business will fail, your team will fail. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. These are all really
project.
Good. Mm-hmm.
Bring us down to the project level. Yeah, and it's more negative than I like to be. Like you guys know, I don't like to be negative. Yeah. I like to put stuff up. And yet I read this list, and I kind of write like clickbait. I read this list, and I went, 6 reasons you're going to fail. Well, let me see what they say. And I went, yep.
Yeah, it's pretty solid.
Yep. So here's number 1, leadership failure.
Right up your alley, Michael.
Yeah. And again, so to be positive on it, yes, I positively agree. But let's look at number 2, lacking uniqueness and value.
In fact, if that's not a startup thing, I don't know what is, right? Well, not so much uniqueness, but value.
Well, and that's exactly what it says, how to avoid value proposition failure. I got to tell you, you and I have started doing this now. And that was kind of like, it's not a pivot for me. What I realized was, the cornerstone of Straight Talk is value. And that's a value proposition because it needs context. You have to be able to tell me what problem do you solve, what value do you create solving that problem, and what we add in a Straight Talk capacity is what's your impact. Because basically, think about it this way. If your impact increases friction in my environment, doesn't integrate with what I'm currently doing, it increases jargon or something in some capacity, then you've actually eroded value, destroyed trust, and burned people out. Well, that's not valuable. I can't move forward on that. Paul, you and I know this. If we ask most people, what problem do you solve? We get, yes. Well, gotta figure that out. And I didn't say it was easy. All right, 3, not in touch with customer needs. Yep. Yeah,
we've talked about that.
Guest,
yeah.
And Mike talked about it. He said, what do you do? Just go talk to him. Unprofitable business model. Yes.
Well, yeah.
And then poor financial management.
Yep.
But the one I think everybody's a surprise, and we've seen this all the time, rapid growth and overexpansion. Everybody always worries, how am I going to scale? How am I going to scale? How am I going to scale? Yeah, so be profitable first and have a business model.
Worry about how you make money, then scale.
And be in connection with everybody else. But then Can you grow too fast and collapse under your weight? Absolutely. Can you expand too fast? Yeah. How do you know the difference? Yeah. Well, all I'd like to say there is what got you where you are may not be what gets you where you need to go. And sometimes that means you have to make changes. Or as you pointed out, get a coach, get somebody who's an expert in ads, get somebody who's an expert in business growth. I mean, we've profiled startups that as they get ready for IPO, they switch over leadership. Why? Because leading a company to an IPO is very different than leading them to their first round of investment. It's a different skill set.
All right, what do we got going on in the startup world, Michael?
It was one of those weeks where there was some stuff going on. All right, so I threw this article in. It's called "How Well Do You Know the Language of Startups?" Just nothing really special there. It's just some interesting terms and things to take a look at. So as I find some of these things, I'm going to stick them in here from time to time just because I find them useful. This one I thought was interesting. K2 Intelligence picked up $7.5 million in debt funding. I threw up their Aller and their Crunchbase links. I hadn't heard of them before. Actually looks like they're an investor in Flashpoint. They have been guests on our program already. I'm friendly with them. I like them a lot. I thought this was interesting. Also looks like they're backed at one point or have some debt financing or equity from AIG. They're just an interesting company. Like it's kind of like they're kind of quiet, and yet here they are doing some pretty interesting stuff. We talked last week, and I think the week before, about McAfee. So McAfee spun out from Intel. They're now standalone again, and they named. Oh gosh, I already forgot his name, and I don't mean any disrespect. Chris Young. They named Chris Young his CEO, and there's been some ink about that to say, okay, what's it like? I mean, he's kind of not really a startup. You're a multi-billion-dollar company, but you've kind of a startup. So actually, Fortune had an interview with him, and it was a video. And I don't typically like videos, and I don't typically like these types of things. And yet I sat and watched the whole thing and went, wow, that's pretty cool. I thought it was good. And the two things I took away from it is he's focusing on focus. He was like, look, as a company, we got to focus. And then he went on a little bit later and he's like, look, we got to really define the product. We got to really define the team. We've got to figure out our talent. And then he said, we got to grow organically and inorganically. Now, what that tells me is that the pressure, right? So he's private equity backed, and I forgot who the players were. So what that means typically is that the exit for that company isn't here yet. They've looked at it, they bought it, and they said, okay, there's something here. So whatever they paid, that was somewhere was it $2 billion, $4 billion spinoff? So private equity is probably going to look to double their money over, let's say, 2 to 4 years on this. So now he's got to go figure that out. And what he's basically saying then is I got to fuel growth. Now, organic growth means we come up with our own stuff. Inorganic growth means I go buy stuff. I go buy companies and I integrate them. Now, what I wanted to point out, and we'll use this for the Exenda, was acquired by GFI. And in fact, if you're familiar with it, I'd love to understand better how it fits because Exenda, provider of wide area network optimization, bandwidth management solutions to enterprises, educators, and service providers. And GFI said, hey, this is awesome because this helps with our commitment to help the SMB market space. And I went, cool. All right. Well, I don't know what they do.
Well, what I hope is it's not really. They're using enterprises as a blanket term, and they're probably more addressing the mid-market, which is where I think GFI's products play. I think that's their play for sure. When I evaluated their products, I was like, this is great for a smaller organization to have one solution that does a lot of things that do it pretty well, I thought, a little more than a year ago. So I thought this was a great acquisition. Now, if they're trying to make the enterprise play and go target larger companies, I think they're going to have trouble.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting to watch. I think GFI actually kind of knows their place in the market, and it seemed pretty disciplined on that. And it seems that they picked somebody up who almost caters to the same thing. I didn't follow the space enough to really know where this fit, and so that's why I said like it wasn't clear. Like I read, and I don't mean to bash. I really don't like bashing people, so I'm using this more as an illustration. So McAfee's CEO says, "Okay, we got to grow, which means we've got to acquire." And then I read about this acquisition, and I'm reading the press release, and I'm sitting here going, "All right, I don't really get it." Like you're saying, this is a cornerstone, and it's going to help, and it's great. And I'm going, "Yeah, those are nice words." How?
Well, no, but I think so I can explain.
They didn't really address it.
So I'll try and address it for them. And maybe I'll get it wrong. But when they talk about wide area network optimization and bandwidth management, if you couple that with what GFI offers, they can go in with a much more comprehensive solution for the mid-market. So the mid-market can go to GFI and say, well, it's great. I can get like vulnerability scanning, some endpoint management, and all this great thing. And oh, by the way, you can integrate so I can do some bandwidth and wide area network optimization. That's just going to be part of their portfolio. So as a mid-market, I can go to one vendor.
So it's a value add.
It's a value add to help expand their market inside of the mid-market, is my guess.
But does that have a security play to it?
Yeah, and I think this is a trend that I've personally been seeing, Michael, and one that I like is when you have a solution that usually will start out in security, right, because we're security nerds, and then you recognize that there's value outside of that. In fact, we're doing that in our own product line today for our startup. We're recognizing there's value at like a dotted line outside of security to something else that, I mean, let's security is an all-encompassing thing, right? Like a really well-run network like they talk about network optimization, like that's all part of security. I mean, having an optimized network that's managed very well speaks volumes to security. And I like that security products today are somewhat branching out from that in a lot of different ways. And I've spoken with quite a few vendors that I see that as a trend. We're experiencing that to transition to my journey, right? And I thought about the three things that we do well that I want to present at a high level to CSOs and C-level executives for offensive countermeasures, right? Like, one, we find bad things in your network, right? So we have the straight security play. We find the compromised hosts. We provide visibility into your network beyond just finding the bad things. What we're realizing is when they analyze the network with our tool, they're like, oh my God, we got to stop because we didn't know we had that branch office over there. Like we got to fix that. So that's really cool. So visibility is another thing. And I want to get our story stronger in we increase the value of your other security investments, right? Because
the BASF,
because we're finding bad things and because we're increasing your visibility, we make your other stuff way more valuable. So that's the elevator pitch. And
for what it's worth, the third part is the one I like the best, personally. That doesn't surprise anybody who pays attention to me. Yeah. But what's interesting though is that when I start now looking at value prop and we ask about that impact question, what's kind of fascinating to me is how people have really resonated with that. Because if you think about it, and maybe you haven't, not you, Paul, but our audience hasn't had a chance to look at it. When I say value prop, if you say, well, I'm internal, good. Well, so then you call it a business case or a justification or your business objectives or your outcomes or whatever. At some point, the basics are saying, if I go solve this problem, in fact, what you're doing simpler is to say, this is the problem I solve. This is why it's important I solve it. This is the value I'm going to create solving that problem. And then and that's usually where people stop and they hope that you get excited about it. And what I've realized is that from a decision-making perspective, what we've been neglecting for a long time is we don't say, well, what's the impact of that solution on my existing environment? Because the context always matters. And I've broken it down into three pieces. But what I always look at then is that how do you integrate into my current environment? And that's why I was pointing out, like when McAfee says we're going to go grow inorganically, it's not easy to grow by buying other companies and integrating them. And that's why I said, it's interesting. And that's why you gave me a lot of good insights into what GFI did with Exinda, because that sounds like they might have picked something that they can integrate and it works. And I'll add, if I think about the problem then, listening to your description, if I'm going into the mid-market, I probably don't have a really big dedicated security team if I have one at all. I've got a team that's responsible for a number of things and security, and this probably really strengthens GFI's play on a number of fronts. That's great. So as I'm listening to you talk, by the way, I think your other 2 points are solid. And I love distilling down to 3. But anytime you can say to somebody, look, when you have us, you're not only going to solve this problem and this problem, I'm going to elevate everything else you've got. I'm going to reduce friction. I'm going to take out complexity, and I'm going to make everything else better. To me, that's always a home run because that's really enhancing my return on everything else. So I think it's great. And naturally, off show, I'll work with you any way I can to help you.
Awesome, thank you.
Push that together.
Yeah,
so that's awesome.
I'm excited. We're getting ready to come out of stealth mode because we did the whole thing that happened that I've explained on the show. So I'm really excited now to take the next step in our journey. So.
Well, I'm excited to hear it. And then I'll come visit you at a show, and we'll see if you can earn an A for a day.
That's it. Hopefully I can be the A for the day. Michael, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching Startup Security Weekly. We'll see everyone next time.